Welcome to Bullying. Today we're going to discuss bullying and UMC and how we change the culture.
This C&E activity expires on January 14, 2021. We have nothing to disclose and there are no conflicts of interest or commercial support. In order to receive your 0.5 contact hours, you must watch this entire presentation, complete and pass the post-test with a 70% or higher, and complete the online evaluation. You will receive links for the post-test and the online evaluation from your clinical instructors.
Here are the objectives we're going to go over today. Define bullying, learn the types of bullying and what to look for, define the costs related to bullying, and define and discuss ways to effectively prevent bullying. Bullying, what is it? Per Townsend, bullying is repeated, offensive, abusive, intimidating, or insulting behaviors, abuse of power, or unfair sanctions that make recipients feel humiliated, vulnerable, or threatened, thus creating stress and undermining self-confidence. Per Stetzer, any nonverbal, verbal, or physical behavior that diminishes another person's needs, concerns, or contributions. These definitions are pretty daunting. They seem harsh, and you would think a no-brainer in ways we do not want to treat each other. But we do. How many of you have ever related to this definition? Give me an example of a time you were bullied and the effect it has had on you. Bullying, what is it? There are a lot of things that occur in our daily lives that feel like bullying, but maybe you're not. Let's review a couple of those. Teasing, having fun, no one is getting hurt, and everyone is participating equally. I know we've all probably been a factor of teasing and know that it doesn't feel very good when you feel like everyone is supposed to be getting along and nobody's getting hurt, but somebody says something and you are the one who gets hurt. Conflict. No one is having fun. Possible solution to the issue or disagreement and equal balance of power. Conflict happens in everyday life. There are going to be times that we disagree with other people or other people have different opinions than we do. The biggest thing is that we learn how to work those out and come to an agreement. Uncivil behavior, possibly intentional, reaction to a strong feeling or an isolated event. Uncivil behavior is intentional, those knee-jerk reactions on isolated events. Uncivil behavior is not professional though, however. The difference in uncivil behavior and bullying is that the uncivil behavior is usually an isolated event and not a repeated behavior. Bullying versus feedback. So what is it? Bullying is repetitive, repeated, offensive, abusive, intimidating, or insulting behaviors. Feedback, however, is constructive, professional, objective, fair, self-controlled, unemotional, performance-focused, and organizationally oriented. Can you see how knowing the difference will make all the difference? Whether feedback is handled professionally or unprofessionally can lead you to feel like you are being bullied. So the difference is all in the occurrence and how it is handled. As you can see, bullying occurs repeatedly. An example of this might be a nurse who repeatedly harps on an EVS worker about cleaning her rooms properly every shift that she works. Feedback. Notice the hopeful, positive connotation that comes with feedback: constructive, professional, performance-based. Now, feedback can feel like bullying when it's handled in an unprofessional manner. If I observe another nurse walk out of a C. diff room and state, "Really, Joan, you didn't wash your hands with soap and water? You know we have to wash our hands when we come out of the room." Was this handled professionally? No. Is it feedback? Yes. It would look differently if I had said it this way: "Joan, do you have a minute for me to speak with you? Make our conversation private." And then I said, "Joan, I noticed you did not wash your hands when you left your C. diff room. I wanted to remind you that our hand sanitizer does not kill the organism and that the protocol is to use soap and water. I wanted to protect you and other patients." Do you see how professional feedback goes a long way? This makes the person I'm talking to feel more at ease, not attacked, and I did it in a private and professional manner. So what are some types of bullying that occur in the workplace? There are different types: staff to staff, manager to staff, and physician to staff. Staff to staff is usually one coworker to another. Some examples of this might be backbiting, gossip, creating nicknames for coworkers, and cliques. Manager to staff or superior bullying might look like this: a charge nurse assigning too hard of an assignment, or a manager not acknowledging patient load and continuing to push to take heavier patient loads again and again. Physicians to staff can look like being asked repeatedly to do things out of your scope of practice, degrading comments, yelling, and abusive language. All of these should not be tolerated and spoken up for. So what are some examples of bullying? Talking about another nurse who's not present, sarcastic feedback, and rolling eyes or nonverbal feedback. Many of us have learned to just tolerate some of these and ignore them. But however, we have to change the culture. Talking about another nurse who is not present. Repeatedly gossiping about coworkers behind their backs is not acceptable. Just like my mom always said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. We should all respect each other enough to protect each other's backs. Sarcastic feedback. Remember, feedback should be constructive and performance-based. If a coworker consistently gives sarcastic feedback, this is bullying, and especially if only it's done to a certain coworker. Examples of this might be saying, "Are you stupid?" when a coworker asks a question, or sighing and saying, "Are you ever going to learn to do anything on your own?" We are a teaching hospital, and across every discipline, we should welcome and invite questions. How else does anyone learn unless they ask what they don't know? There's more harm done in causing a team member to choose not to ask for fear of response than to welcome even what may seem like the silly questions. Rolling eyes and nonverbal feedback. Our body language tells 90% of the story. If my arms are crossed and I'm not facing you, the impression is given that I'm not engaged and I do not care. If I roll my eyes at you every time you come to ask a question, I make you feel like a burden and incompetent. This is true for our patients as well. If we are in a room but standing at the door sideways with one foot in the doorway and one foot in the room, what we are really telling the patient is, I'm not 100% here. I'm partially here, but I'm really thinking about what I need to do outside of your room. However, the perception is totally different when we step just 2 feet in the door and fully face our patient. This tells the patient, I am here 100% and you are my priority. Shouldn't we give our coworkers our 100% priority so that we create a culture and unit of family? So what are some of the facts of bullying that can affect our organization? Roughly 60% of new RNs quit their first job within 6 months of being bullied, and 1 in 3 new grads considers quitting nursing altogether because of abusive or humiliating encounters. New grads are often a targeted group, and up to 90% of bullying incidents are witnessed. We all know from our new GNs that they need lots of encouragement and are more prone to switch jobs in their first year and usually seek a better work-life balance than most of us who are currently in the hospital. This statistic I am sure rings true in other areas as well. If the environment I work in is not inviting, I will not choose to stay. Why are new graduates and new employees, for that matter, targeted? Well, for obvious reasons. They are new and they have the most questions. But I think the most gut-wrenching fact is that 90% of bullying is witnessed. What does this mean? That almost always there was room for someone to speak up, stop the line, and say something, and they didn't. This means we have an opportunity to stop it because only 10% of the time is someone not around to hear or see the bullying event occur. Generational differences are hard enough, but bullying added into the mix only multiplies the problem. So what are the effects of bullying on our work? Let's look. Decreased work productivity, higher turnover, depression, anxiety, increased absence from work, decreased safety, decreased consistency, decreased collaboration, and decreased teamwork. A lot of times depression, feeling inadequate, and anxiousness all work against us as we have the bullying effects. The other cost is also turnover, productivity, absence, safety, collaboration with team, and they all lead to hard dollar costs. Just to call in alone due to bullying leads to nurses on the other end being paid $10 more per hour to cover shifts that are short-staffed. And what does it do for morale? Well, if I'm you, I feel like I always come in and I feel like there's not enough people to do the job. Take a trip back in time to your first day on the first shift after your orientation. How many of you were scared out of your mind? How many of you had nurses who had made you feel like you were inadequate or not part of the team and asking a question was out of the question? How many of you felt like outsiders to a team of staffers who had been together for a long time? Now imagine the inclusive culture welcoming a new grad, a new team member, and strategically having a place where they can share their issues. So what are the costs to UMC when bullying events occur? Let's take a look. The monetary loss of a nurse is between $22,000 and $67,000 within 6 to 12 months. There's a decrease in productivity when we have to onboard new nurses, and there's a higher turnover that leads to more money spent on new hires to replace nurses leaving. We all know we're in the business of care and compassion, We also know that we are a business and money drives our caring capabilities. Let's take, for example, that 20 nurses listened to this presentation. Based on the facts on the previous slide, 60% will quit due to a bullying incident. That means that 12 of you will quit your job. So if 12 of you quit your job and there's a monetary loss on the low end of $22,000, that's a minimum of $264,000 lost. But it doesn't stop there, does it? Because when you started your job at UMC, did someone train you? Absolutely. That means we paid 2 people to do what 1 person can. So if we did this for 12 of you and now you leave, what must we do? We have to rehire 12 new people to take your place, along with paying another $264,000. That's a lot of money, and I would rather keep my coworkers and create a family bond than to constantly have new replacements. Intentional relationships on a unit can help decrease this turnover. If I know you have my back and we support each other and treat each other with respect, I don't want to leave. Speaking up and stopping the line will help decrease these turnover costs. So how do we break the cycle and get off the merry-go-round? Empower the new GN and the new employee. Model the right behavior. Speak up when bullying is observed. Respect those behind the badge and have zero tolerance. We are the solution. We must speak up and have zero tolerance for bullying behavior. This goes for nursing and non-nursing across the board. We must be the change. Allow for communication and create those moments for talking. We need to not be afraid of retaliation and create a culture where we talk to each other professionally. Respecting those behind the badge is more than just a name. Our hospital does not function without every player working together. From a greeter, social worker, EVS team member, maintenance, charge nurse, staff nurse, respiratory therapist, physical therapist, HUC, and every position in between. We are a team in what makes UMC unique, but we must stop bullying and start speaking up. Respect others' privacy, don't speak negatively, don't be nosy, stand up for the absent, and don't criticize publicly. So why do nurses eat their young and superiors eat their young as well? I don't know, but history repeats itself, so just because that's how we were taught doesn't mean it must continue. The statement has said a lot about nurses, and I think we feel like we have to live up to it. However, it can be said for almost any job in the hospital. It has almost become norm, as if a rite of passage, that since this is what I had to endure when I was in your shoes, so must you. It must stop. We must be brave and bold enough to say that this may be the way it was when I was learning, but I choose to be an agent of change for a better culture. So let's discuss and talk about some examples. Remember I asked you in the beginning of our talk, I wanted you to think about a time you were bullied in the workplace or as a child. I want you to think back to that instance in which you were bullied. Isn't it amazing that sometimes the bullying that happened when we were in elementary school we can recall like it was yesterday? If your instance is from work, do you find it interesting that the memory of it is easy to recall, but the times of recognition and those stopping bullying are not as easy to remember? We leave a ripple effect in lives when we choose to bully one another. I ask you this, what ripples and legacy do you want to leave on others? Ones of memories of bullying or ones of a dynamic family unit at UMC that is irreplaceable? This is our choice to make. So why are we discussing it, and can it really be that bad? UMC is an amazing place to work. It really can't be happening at UMC. But guess what? It is. Let's review some live examples of the behavior that is occurring inside our walls. I went to a charge nurse to ask for a second opinion. She looked at me and said, "You are a nurse too, so use your judgment." Nurses on my unit that are unfriendly, and I feel stupid for asking them questions, so I have to find nice nurses to ask my questions to. An experienced nurse yelled at me for 30 minutes at bedside with patient family present because an intubated patient didn't have an esophageal temp probe. A nurse on the unit refused to help me during my first day on a unit and kept telling me the entire unit how far behind I was, meanwhile shopping for online products, and ignored my patient-centered questions. A nurse on my unit rolls her eyes and uses unkind words every time a graduate nurse asks a question. Then she goes and talks to other nurses on our unit about the crappy graduate nurses on our unit. So what do I do, and how do I speak up? I know you want to make a change, and so do I. We can start by choosing to be a hospital of feedback, meaning we give feedback in real time. That is professional and done often. If we would practice feedback across all disciplines all the time, it would become part of our everyday conversations and we would all grow professionally. But first, you can start by pledging to your peers. Professionally give them feedback, speak up for bullying in a bullying situation, and take it to the person who the action is actually occurring with. If, however, you've talked to your peer and things are not changing, then your next line in the chain of command is to speak with your charge nurse and have them help in the conversation. If you have spoken to your peer and your charge nurse and things are still not changing, then your next step is to take one of your management team. If your leadership does not know that bullying is occurring on the unit, they cannot fix it. However, I encourage you to go in with facts and not hearsay, as well as a proposed solution to help change the bullying behavior on your unit. Lastly, if you have exhausted all of these means and you still feel that bullying is not being addressed, you can speak to the VP that is over your unit. I firmly believe that if we would all choose to take and use feedback professionally and speak up for the bullying behavior that's been going on in our facility, that we could resolve it. Here are some 2-minute tips from Renee Thompson talking about bullying in nursing and bullying proofing. I encourage you to review these to help you identify some different aspects within your unit. I want to thank you for taking your time to listen and learn about bullying. I know that your time is valuable. My hope is that we start to change today and make ripples of positive family-oriented relationships across the hospital.